flew all the way to Japan to talk about a goldfish that causes an extinction-level flood. What's your favorite Miyazaki movie? Ponyo is peak Ghibli. It's soft, it's warm, it's gentle, and it's barely hiding a total environmental collapse. This movie goes out of its way to show us that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is a toddler running on vibes. It's day 71 of 365. Today's movie, Ponyo. This one's directed by the legendary Hayao Miyazaki, and I am so excited to bring a Studio Ghibli film to the Daily Stub review. This is one that I saw as a teen during its re-release into theaters, and though I had seen a couple of his movies beforehand, this was my first theatrical experience with Miyazaki, and it knocked my socks off. Even my too cool for school persona at the time was not enough to protect me from the things that I was going to feel while watching this powerful movie. This also marked my foray into going to see movies in the theater by myself as kind of like a pseudo-religious experience. This was my own movie church, and Ponyo was the first time that I took myself to the movies by myself. No one wanted to go see a Japanese film that they had never heard of from a director that they were barely familiar with, even though I could tell them it was from the guy that brought Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away. Nobody cared, so I was seeing this one totally on my lonesome. I also saw the English dub of this in theaters, which I know there's a lot of shit around a sub or dub when it comes to watching a Miyazaki film. Personally, I think that their approach to the dubbing process requires two watches. You should watch something subbed and dubbed when they put it out, because they put a lot of effort into their dubs. Look at the lineup and cast on this. It is so eclectic. It's all over the place, but it's to bring a very specific vision of the voices together. I know it's weird to see Liam Neeson and Tina Fey in the same billing, but it works here so incredibly well in grounding us in reality on Tina Fey's end and then taking us into this advanced, fantastical world that only Liam Neeson can bring that bravado to. Noah Cyrus's performance brings a lot of humanity to a young kid role. It reminds me a lot of Dakota Fanning doing Lilo and Stitch. And then, of course, nobody talks about this, but there's a fourth Jonas brother, and that Jonas brother does the voice of Sasuke in this, which I know I could use as an excuse to talk about Naruto, but I will relieve you of that, and instead we can talk about the three things that I absolutely love about Ponyo. The first thing that I love so much about Ponyo, and this probably feels redundant to say when you're talking about a Ghibli film, it's the animation. Now, here's my hot take. This is the most beautiful Ghibli movie that exists. Now, that's not to say the others aren't beautiful and aren't absolutely gorgeous works of art, but Ponyo has within it so many stills that are absolutely drop-dead gorgeous, with animations that you can't find in any of the others. The fantasy elements that we find in things like Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle are awesome, but they're so removed from our real world that I feel like the natural beauty can be lost in them. Ponyo is not like that. Ponyo has Devonesian era creature life in the water, which is real. That's a real era that happened, and to see that represented in film was amazing. And keep in mind, I was in a cult at this time that didn't believe those kinds of creatures really exist. We thought those things were planted fossils to promote the devil, and here we have Miyazaki bringing them to life on the big screen for my teenage eyes to see and to be blown away by the beauty of something like that. Suddenly, I was calling God into question in the theater during this religious film experience, because what do you mean this could have been one of the most gorgeous areas for life on Earth ever? I think something that is that powerful, that could make me doubt my own religion, is proof positive to me. And again, this is a subjective thing, but it's proof positive to me that this is his most beautiful film. This is also the beginning of an era where water is the big hot topic for animation, whether that's CGI animation or hand-drawn. Water is something that we are always trying to animate more realistically, more factually. And Ponyo goes out of its way to say water is a living spirit within this world, and it can take on many, many different forms, including physical forms. I think about the incoming flood and how that turns into fish, that it's showing us the way that the environment and the creatures that live in that environment are uniquely connected to each other in the way that they move in their fluidity. That's beautiful. You don't get to see that in something like a Pixar animation where they're aiming for water realism. And that's not to say that it isn't an accomplishment in its own right, but instead of focusing that way, focusing into the artistry of it, I think is an absolutely gorgeous metaphor for what is a water-based story. Now, I'll also go out of my way to call my bias as a water sign that I'm just more comforted by water imagery than I am by non-water imagery. So maybe I'm always going to be biased this way, but I just can't help but think of Ponyo when people ask me what's the most beautiful Ghibli film. The second thing that I love so much about Ponyo is the story. This is a timeless classic. We all know that this was written a long time ago by a European writer. This was adapted very famously during the Disney Renaissance for Americans, and now here we get to see it re-represented for Japan. However, I do think there's a key difference happening within this version of the story that makes it really hit harder and better. The original version of The Little Mermaid is based around romantic love. Now, not to say there's anything wrong with that, but that is an aspiration we've learned for little kids is not always the best thing. It can set up really unrealistic relationship standards and things that kids don't really need to be worried about. And this version seems to not only understand that, but to oppose those things entirely by instead centering this story around toddlers. We have basically young kindergarten-age kids that are learning how to navigate a violent, destructive, and beautiful world. Their friendship is full love. There's nothing about this story that is not a love story, but it's a platonic love story. It's a love story where the romance doesn't ever have to become a thing. Sasuke and Ponyo love each other to the depths of their heart, absolutely without need for it to be romantic. And the movie doesn't even ask the question of, do they grow up to get together? It doesn't need to ask that question because they're just kids and they just need to live as kids and have their own adventure as children. What that does to the story is it shifts it from this yearning and need for fulfillment through love to the fulfillment through love of person, just loving another person. We see Sasuke loves his mom with the same amount of fervor that he loves Ponyo. He loves his dad, who's not even visible on screen, with the same fervor that he loves Ponyo. Ponyo loves her dad with the same fervor that she loves Sasuke. That love is only accomplishable through young children who haven't been taught otherwise, who haven't been hurt by the world enough to know that there are stipulations on love as they get older. That's gorgeous. That in and of itself makes this peak Ghibli for me, because you see that running through a lot of his stories, but the romantic airs seem to seep their way in the older the characters get. When we look at A Princess Mononoke, there's arguably some horniness going on in that movie. That is totally absent from a story like Ponyo. And when you're telling a story like The Little Mermaid, that's not necessary. A little bonus thing also that I love is the combination of Ursula with King Triton from the Disney version in Ponyo's dad in this version. He's the sorcerer and the king of the sea, technically. So he gets to fulfill both ends of that role, which again, prevent it from going into this like romantic air, where that's what Ursula is making the spin to Ariel for, right? Is that she wants to be with her love, so she has to give up a part of herself. Instead, in this version, we get Ponyo learning that she has to change who she is fundamentally to leave her world, but that doesn't mean she has to give any part of herself up. That's really important, that's really cool, and that's the second thing that I love about Ponyo. My third favorite thing about Ponyo is this is the ultimate comfort movie. Now, I would actually go out of my way to say that Castle in the Sky is my favorite comfort movie among the Ghibli films, but I also had this discussion a lot on my old podcast, the difference between best and favorite. And when we're talking about something that is a favorite, that's fully subjective. There's kind of no wrong answers. When we talk about best, there usually is an overwhelming list of pros into that category. And if I were to list the things that are required for a comfort movie, things like warm cups of ramen and childlike whimsy and being around water and water sounds. These are things that top my list as to things that would bring me comfort if I played it in the background. Ponyo is no slouch when it comes to any of these things. And I think even like a Howl's Moving Castle or a Spirited Away have too many like industrial, chunky, metallic sounds to fall into this like ASMR kind of area that would lend itself to be the most comforting movie. Maybe this is something that we can all test for ourselves too. I will often put a Ghibli film on to fall asleep at night, and my go-tos are Castle in the Sky or Ponyo. These have lots of blues and soft colors to paint the room with. They tend to not be overly loud or overly exploding. When they are loud, it's kind of like a murmur of the crowd, and there's less people in Ponyo overall, and there's so many quiet moments in Ponyo that even towards the end of the film, as we get into like the third act, it actually slows down and puts us on a little boat with two little kids instead of picking up speed where most of the other films do. Now, again, if you don't agree with this, that's totally fine. I'm not saying that you should change your Ghibli comfort film, but I would definitely argue, if I were in some kind of debate around which is the most comforting of his films, Ponyo is going to be top of my list. But what do you think? I asked at the top, what's your favorite Miyazaki film? What is, do you think, the best, now that I've mentioned best versus favorite? Now, I do have to apologize for this. I know that we did 2 gory movies, and then we talked about Ponyo, and I'm going to switch us gears back into gory. This was just a violent summer, I think, because our next film on the Daily Stub review is The Final Destination, or Final Destination 4, for anybody that's counting. But, as always, I will see you tomorrow.